Hey, Kitchen Stewardship, Kids Cook Real Food. Katie Kimball here with a very special edition of the Healthy Parenting Connector sliding into Kitchen Stewardship because we have got to talk about something incredibly important, especially as calendars flip and routines change and people are super committed to getting healthy again. I've got Jess Dang here from Cooksmarts to talk about meal planning, which I believe, and I know she believes, is like the foundation of healthy cooking. Thanks for being here, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, so we are going to talk about the super practical because that's what we do. Because if you can't make it practical, you can't get it done. And Jess is a mom of 3 very little ones, if I am correct about that. She's a kitchen cheerleader to thousands of people. And she's super passionate, like I am, about the power of a home cooked meal to nurture our bodies and strengthen our connections to one another. And that's why she founded Cooksmarts, which is a meal planning system for busy moms. I'm always so proud of her. She's been featured on the Today Show, voted #1 meal planning site on Lifehacker. And it's super good reason because Cooksmarts not only provides really delicious meal plans, but what I love what Jess does is she helps folks who might not be like masters in the kitchen to understand like the basics of cooking and prep and flavors and just how to really get everything done in a super practical way. So today we're going to talk about how meal planning is invisible labor. This is a phrase that I had not heard before, but I love the idea that it's like something that's totally taken for granted. So how do we resurrect that and make it more visible to the family, partially by getting everyone involved to reduce mom's mental overload? This is going to be so good. But let's start at your beginning, Jess. How did you get into like healthy eating and decide to want to like help others meal plan? This is not something you say you're going to be when you grow up, probably.
No, if you told me 20 years ago I'd become a professional meal planner, I would ask you, like, what does that even mean, seriously? Right. So for me, the whole story of Cooksmarts actually started about over 20 years ago when I was 17 and I was diagnosed with hepatitis C. It was one of those totally like freak things that happened where I had a blood transfusion when I was born, and apparently the blood that I received was, had the virus in it. And it wasn't until I was 17 donating blood for a blood drive that I discovered that I had this potentially life-threatening virus, and that kind of led me on this whole health journey. I went through a year-long chemotherapy and just felt really like not in control of my health. And even though the treatment went really well for me, and I'm here today, more than 20 years later and really healthy, it was one of those things I wasn't sure about. So I said to myself, like, if I live to the age of 30, I'm going to try to do something to help others lead a healthier life. And so when I turned 30, I was working in the corporate world, and I decided I'm going to fulfill my promise. I left my job and started Cooksmarts. And in the beginning, I had no idea what Cooksmarts was going to be. I knew I loved cooking. I loved healthy eating. I loved education and, teaching people how to cook. And I just wanted to figure out a way to combine all of those things. And so I spent a year actually teaching people to cook in their homes and also in high schools as well. And I just discovered that, like, people are really busy, and meal planning was one of those like points of friction, like where people just, they wanted to cook, but they couldn't figure out the meal planning piece of it. And so I was like, why don't I start a meal planning service and also kind of incorporate like the educational components within it? So while people are being told what to cook for dinner every single night, they're also getting kind of a mini cooking lesson, and it kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's how Cooksmart started over like 7 years ago now.
That's so amazing. Like, what a just terrifying feeling to have this horrible disease as a teenager. And then I just love, it's like literally inspiring, like raises the hair on the end when you're like, yeah, I turned 30 and I just quit. Yeah. I quit my real job and like decided to try and help people. And you can tell that your heart is to help people in all parts of your business, which is so wonderful. And so why do you think meal planning is so world changing that it was worth quitting your job?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's totally not a sexy subject, but it is so important, right? Like, when we think about the work, no one goes and starts a project without a plan. And I think people need to start applying those principles to home, because when you think about it, you have to eat multiple times a day. And like that, each time you eat, you're kind of having to make a decision for your kids, for yourself, like, what are we going to eat? And we don't kind of, I'm all about efficiency, right? So like, we don't batch those tasks and we have to do it at multiple points of the day, 7 days a week. Like, that really is what the mental load is about, like having to make these decisions all the time. There's just a lot of friction there. So I really believe when we get into a meal planning routine, we batch the task and sit down and do it all in one go. And that really removes the friction for the rest of the week and that overwhelm that we experience at 4 o'clock when you're, sitting at work or at home or wherever you are being like, oh my God, I don't have a plan for dinner. And that just like unleashes this whole escalate of like, okay, now what am I going to do? And then if you don't end up making the home cooked meal that you wanted to, you feel bad about it. And so I think when we have a plan, and the plan can include things like, this is the day we're not going to cook and do takeout. Yeah. But when you have that in the plan, you don't feel like it's a last minute sort of like stressful thing where, there's intention behind it. So it's totally different. So that's why I really think that it is life-changing, because it just removes like so much of that mental overwhelm when we do it in one go versus having to make those teeny little decisions. And there's so much friction. And that's often why people don't cook, because they're just like, well, this is like the decision-making part just feels too much. So I'm just not gonna do it.
Yeah. And then there can be stress after the fact because you feel guilty that you didn't make the home cooked meal you want. So we know stress impacts the health of the family and the health of the person, the mom usually. And so even food aside, reducing your stress is going to increase the health of your family as well. The way I see it, whether our listeners out there have maybe never meal planned or they've done it, but are like on and off the wagon, or even if they're great meal planners, but they could like get their family involved more, we are totally going to serve them today. So let's start with those who need to figure out how to start or restart, I'm raising my hand, a meal planning habit. What's the magic pixie dust that you can share with us to get us going?
Okay, so I'm the bearer of bad news here that I don't quite believe in magic pixie dust.
That's okay.
But a lot of it is just like, when it comes to meal planning or really any change, we just have to put in the effort, right? Like there's work involved. We have to want to do it. There has to be an intention behind it. But so, for me, like as an ex-consultant, what I would do is go into the kind of problem-solving mode and ask it, what was it that didn't work before? Like, why did you fall off the wagon? What was it about the routine? And because when people ask me, like, what's the best meal planning system or best meal planning routine? My answer is always like the routine that you're going to stick with. So whatever you were doing before, I would go back and understand, like, why did this plan not work for me? Like, why did this process not work for me? And then troubleshoot from there. So maybe it's like you were actually maybe being too ambitious, right? So like if you were trying to cook 6-7 days a week and, do everything like homemade, maybe that was too ambitious. So I would then go back to the plan and say like, okay, when I'm going to start again, let's maybe start with like 3 home cooked meals and fill in here with some freezer things or some takeout or whatever it is. And so to me, it's like all about baby steps and understanding like what didn't work before and introducing things to setting yourself up for success, right? So transformation doesn't happen overnight as much as we wish it did. And so I would really go back and understand what didn't work before, fix those changes, and then introduce them in small ways so that you're not having to feel like you're turning our life upside down in order to meal plan. And I think that really sets you up more for success than if you try to make humongous changes overnight and not really understanding what didn't work before.
Mm-hmm. I'm already like, it's just a simple question. What didn't work before?
Yeah.
Yeah. Duh. Because when I try to meal plan on a Sunday night, because that's kind of like when I feel like I should meal plan, I'm usually a little bit tired by then.
Yeah.
Right. So there's my issue. So I could do it Sunday right after lunch, or I'm even thinking like maybe for me I need to break it down into smaller steps and say like, okay, like on a Wednesday or a Thursday I'm just gonna browse some recipes because that's fun and I won't put that off and just put some Post-its in some books or pin some things, and then when I have to like sit down and do it, I'll be like one step closer. And I think also, I love that you give grace and you're like, so plan takeout, plan just 3, like that's okay. I think planning takeout is awesome because then you're kind of looking forward to it, which is the exact opposite of like, oh, I'm throwing in the towel and I hate this about my day, right? Like,
no, totally. Like takeout should feel like a treat. Like it's a treat to like not have to cook for the day.
Yeah.
It's like pick your favorite, Indian restaurant or Chinese restaurant, but not have it like, but when it is like that last minute, like, shoot, I'm doing this because like I didn't plan something else, then you feel bad about it. And then you don't get that same like satisfaction and enjoyment out of the meal. Right. And so, but when you plan for it, it's like, oh, well, I had planned for this. This was my like break in the middle of the week. It's great. I'm just planning for on a Wednesday just to get you through that hump. And then you can get back right into the routine of cooking if that's what you want.
Right, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
choosing like simple meals, like I was just thinking, we traveled for 6 weeks this summer. And so
Yeah.
we were always like every couple of days, we were in a different Airbnb or friend's house or whatever.
Oh
So
my
like,
gosh.
number one, I had to plan because you don't have like your storage. I don't have my freezer and my
Mm-hmm.
basement with all my dry beans and everything. And so I just at the beginning of the summer made a list of 10 meals that I knew I could shop for and cook in one day. And we just
Yeah.
used the same 10 meals all summer. And it's like, well, that worked. So why am I
Yeah.
not like implementing some of that idea in my normal life?
Exactly. That's so smart. That's a great routine. And maybe just like you use those 10 meals and every week you introduce one new meal, but it doesn't
Yeah.
then, it just like removes the burden of like feeling like, oh my God, I'm starting with a blank slate. You already have a great foundation. So yeah, start there.
Yeah. So obviously I'm the one who's kind of on and off that wagon. So for people who know the value of meal planning, they've done it before, like how do you stay motivated once you restart to like stick with that habit?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they just have to remember the why, right? Like why are you doing this? So, and I think, when you see it in like a more physical sense of like whether it's your budget, right? So you can compare those weeks where you did meal plan, looking at your food, total food budget, including like takeout and eating out versus the weeks that you don't like, you really do see a difference. So I think for folks looking at that, that really helps. And I think I asked actually this to our members, to our meal plan members, being like, what, like the weeks when you're feeling lazy, like, why do you keep doing this? Like, what's your motivation? And a lot of them said like, besides from the budget, it's just the fact that like, oftentimes like, like going out for like waiting for takeout or whatever else, whatever the default plan is, it actually takes just as long to then just like cook the meal. Right. So like if the decision-making part is already done for them, like then the cooking part really isn't so bad. So when you think about like, your end goal, like why are you doing this, why are you meal planning, like it's because you want to like create more home cooked meals and create more dinner memories with kids or whatever it is, like that really kind of helps root you back into the routine. So I think like when you think about it, like it feels like a chore on that Sunday night, like you said, like maybe you do it before, but whatever it is, like think about like why are we doing this, why is this important to the family routine, and that really helps you. And I think like a lot of us, like to get into it, we have to just get out of that mindset that it is a chore. For me, like maybe take it to like, take your laptop to a cafe and enjoy, do your meal planning over like a nice coffee and a pastry or something. So like figure out a way to make it feel like a treat in a way. Like that's for me, like for meal prep, like sometimes I feel like I'm too lazy to prep tonight, but then I'm like, I'm going to let myself like listen to a podcast or like watch a episode of Parks and Rec that I've watched a million times. So I don't really need to be paying attention, but it feels like a treat. So I feel like sometimes we just need to shift that like mindset and like figure out a way to make it feel not so much like a chore.
Yeah. And I'm sure for people like in your members Facebook group, there's some motivation and community there, right?
Yeah, totally. Yes, exactly. So yeah, I think a lot of it is like you are not alone in this journey, right? Like no one is like, oh my God, I can't wait to meal plan or meal prep or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think you just realize like, oh, everyone is like going through this, like a lot of other people are going through this with you, and find like accountability there. That's such a great point. Like find other members, whether it's a Facebook group that's doing meal planning together. I know that your community is so strong. So I just like find other people to bounce ideas off of and to like keep yourselves accountable.
Yeah. And I know people like who will take a picture of their meal plan and share it even just on their personal Facebook too. Like that could be something where you feel like, oh, like if I don't do this, people are going to know I was lazy this week, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Or maybe partner up with someone where like you meal, like, a friend that you meal plan for a week and they meal plan, you can just swap. And like, if it's like you guys have similar size families and similar tastes, like that is something that's like really easy to do. And then someone is counting on you for their meal plan for the week. And you definitely don't want to, leave them hanging by any means.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously meal planning, meal prepping is work, as you just said, but
Yes.
you've called meal planning invisible labor. Can you unpack
Yeah.
that a little bit? Why do we want to
Yeah.
make our meal planning more visible?
Yeah, well, for me, a lot of it is like my kids, I love them, but they can be so ungrateful. Don't realize like all the work that goes involved into like their lives and making sure they have everything that they need. Right. And so like, I think a lot of it, like they really do appreciate a home cooked meal, but they see the meal, but they don't realize like all of the invisible labor that has to go into getting that home cooked meal on the table. It's not just the cooking, right? Like that's clearly the planning, the grocery shopping and all of that. And I think, it's important as families and as moms to really help your partners and your kids understand that like we do a lot of work and like I think it will help them as they become adults to realize that you are not some like magician, right? And like, I think it actually helps them realize like, God, there is a lot of work involved into being an adult. Like, I think like when they become adults, they can realize like, oh yeah, they're like, these are life skills that they need. And like, when you hide it from them, they are kind of, it's a bit of a disservice to them because they grow up not realizing that like mom was doing all these things behind the scenes. So I think it's not just like helpful for our own mental health, but also just for the kids too, to really involve them in these life skills and bring it into the forefront earlier on. And so I think when you get the whole family involved, it not only relieves the stress for you, but it you know, like I said, like it's really important to pass these skills on to our kids as early as possible.
Yeah. So how would that work, getting the family involved? Because I know like sometimes we've talked about already, I'm kind of out of capacity when it's meal planning time, or I've already took the kids in. And so, you know, it feels a little bit like, wait, no, isn't that like more work to get the family
Yeah.
involved? What to you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the ages of your kids, right? So like I have very young kids. I have a 7-month-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 4-year-old. So they're not exactly going to be, you know, I'll ask the 4-year-old, what would you like for dinner next week? And she gives me some good ideas that I do try to incorporate them. But I think a lot of it is just thinking about how to involve them in a way that's not going to be burdensome to you depending on their age, right? So like at this age, my kid's age, a lot of it is like, we just talk about the meal and what during the meal time, like what mama needed to do in order to like, you know, make the pork chops tonight. And like and I think talking about that helps them realize like, oh, it's like this meal took, you know, a lot of work. And I think when they're older, I think a lot of it is just understanding what you can assign them. So like when you are doing your meal planning, or maybe the few days before, ask them like, mama's going to be doing meal planning in a few days. Like, can you think of a side dish for something? Or if they're older, you can ask them, like, you can assign them an entire day, but give them some like structure, right? So it's like, Tuesdays are going to be Taco Tuesdays. Can you go and find, if they have access to the internet, like, or with whatever supervision from you, like, can you go and find a taco recipe you think you would like, and then, you know, send it to me or email it to me or text it to me. So I think that's just like understanding what age they are and what they're capable of. And we don't want it to be more work for you, but I think in the beginning, like with all things with kids, like things are going to be a little bit more work. Like I've just got through potty training. It's like, I know the benefits. I know I need to do this, but you know, the work involved is not really necessarily fun, but you know, the payoff is good. Like it's the same thing with meal planning. It's like, you know, like with any life skill you want to teach your kids, in the beginning, there's going to be a little bit more work, but just understanding what age and stage they're at is really helpful. Just like with all the kids cook real foods things, like everything is, you know, meant for whatever developmental stage that they're at, and gives them, like, you want to help them succeed too, right? So just understanding where they're at is really helpful.
Yeah, in our own family, my kids have had to start meal planning now. So they've been making dinner once a week for like 2 years. But for a while, the first year, it was just homemade pizza every Sunday, right? Which was cool too. Like they got to, you know, learn a recipe like really intimately. But now they're having to plan their own stuff, and it's mostly a disaster, which is good because they feel the pain of like, oh, like we didn't plan. So they'll say, you know, the day before or that day when they get home from school, like, Mom, we want to make such and such. And I'm like, I don't have that ingredient. Like I don't make a run for one ingredient. Sorry guys, like you can plan that next week and it can get on my grocery list, but like you can't do that this week. And one time I think they were doing meatballs, and so they had like partially thawed meat. You know, they hadn't thawed the meat. So they kind of like thaw it in water. And my son spent 10 minutes making the meatballs and like practically frostbit his fingers because it was partially frozen, right? He was like, whew, that was rough. And I'm like, like how can you avoid that situation next time? So, you know, they're learning through failure, and honestly, that's the way to learn, because he'll probably be more cognizant of thawing the meat from now on.
Yes, exactly. No, that is perfect. I think like we learn so much from failures, right? Like I think seeing, like having to go through it themselves, like realizing like home is not a 24-hour grocery store. Like you have to plan things, you know, mom had to plan things to make the meatballs. You're going to have to plan things to make the meatballs. And like, I think that's perfect. That's such a smart way to go about it. And clearly you have, you know, with your older kids, that is, hopefully they are helping you lighten the load to some extent, despite the fact that sometimes maybe dinner isn't exactly how, you know, they wanted it to turn out or you wanted it to turn out.
Yes. At this point, it's totally lightens the load because I get an entire night off.
Yeah.
I go tackle my to-do list while they're in the kitchen. And if they're struggling, like they get through it. We have always had dinner at the end. We've always had something edible. And they're usually not even as late getting dinner to the table as I am. So
yeah, so you already see the payoff. Like maybe it was painful that like, in the beginning, but now like the payoff is already here. And clearly like with all the skills that you have taught your kids over the years, I'm sure they are so, just like well ahead of the curve in the kitchen and are so well set up for being an adult and being away from the home someday.
Yes, they're figuring it out. And this is definitely the next step, is once you know how to do the skills, you got to do the planning and the shopping. Like that's huge.
Yeah. So many of our members tell us it's like, I just had no idea that meal planning was like a skill, or the fact that like it had to be, one of the quotes I read recently, like who knew that like the hardest part about being an adult was the fact that like you need to plan your meals like 3 times a day. And as a parent, right, it's so true. It's one of those things that it's such an invisible labor. And I think the more we show kids that this is a skill that you're going to have to figure out someday for yourself, if you want to, enjoy home cooked meals or nurture like nutritious meals, like the earlier we set them up for that expectation and to help build that skill, like, the better we're serving them.
Yeah, absolutely. I read a hilarious article once about a woman whose husband decided to help out. And he said, I'll make dinner every Friday or whatever it was. And on the first day he was supposed to make dinner, he walked in from work and said, I'm ready to cook. What do you want me to make?
Yeah.
And she went, like,
exactly.
Because he had no idea that cooking that had so many steps before walking into the kitchen. And so
right.
you see that the first time, maybe a spouse or a child or someone who hasn't done the cooking, like they just don't understand that there's this whole cascading chain of links that has to happen.
And that is what invisible labor is. It's all the stuff that nobody realizes you're doing and all the things you're just like holding in your head and, constantly juggling. It's like, yeah, exactly. Like cooking a home cooked meal is not just the cooking part. It's like, the planning, the grocery shopping, like all that has to happen in order for the home cooked meal to happen.
Yep. Yeah. And organizing the food. My kids will get upset if we're like out of ketchup, and I'll say, well, nobody told me that they grabbed the last ketchup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
like I don't have a magic vision that says, oh, we're missing the ketchup on, the backup ketchup on the shelf or whatever.
You don't have all the smart fridges yet. That's like tells you the ketchup is missing. We need more of it.
Oh man, someday that'll probably happen, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So I think Cooksmarts, Jess, is just an incredible program. I know you have thousands of people in your Kitchen Heroes Facebook group. And I love, like I said at the top, the extra help that you give people on like how to use a knife and how to understand seasonings and what fits together well and what can be frozen and what can't. Can you give us like a quick overview about what people can expect from you at Cooksmarts?
Yeah, so Cooksmarts, we like to make things super simple. So you can have things as simple as you want or as complicated as you want. So every week we send you a menu with just 4 dinners, because that's kind of like, sometimes the more you have, the more dinner decision overwhelm you have, but 4 dinners is a great place to start. If you want to just use those 4 dinners, that's great. You can choose there's gluten-free, vegetarian, and paleo options for each one of the meals. And so you actually get all the diet options. And the reason we do that is we see so many diet blended families these days. Like maybe mom is paleo and one of the kids is vegetarian. So we just want to give you access to everything. So like you can kind of figure out what the adaptation needs to be for, every eater in your household. And if you are just like, want to cook 2 of those meals, you can cook 2 of the meals. If you want to cook 7 meals a week, you can add from our archives, which we have a recipe archive dating back to 2013 when we started. So there's basically like something for everyone. And then once you pick your meals for the week, the grocery lists are automatically generated. We realize like families come in all sizes and shapes. And so you can, maybe one night of the week you're cooking for 5 people, but one night you're only cooking for 3 because so-and-so has practice or other things going on. And so you can customize your serving sizes. There's just so much flexibility involved. And really a lot of it, I think the biggest benefit, not just like reducing the mental load, is just feeling like there's the community aspect. It's like you're cooking the same meals as a lot of other people and everybody's in it together. And I think that's just really important because, so many of us are really busy these days. And like, even when we sit down to the table, it might feel hectic, but I feel like eating and cooking is such a communal thing. And, when you maybe have that larger community supporting you and being behind you, like we have in our Facebook group, that really can make a huge difference. And sometimes, you know, if your kids are in that picky eating phase and they're not exactly appreciative of your efforts, you have other people to show off your meals to and be like, hey, look what I made. And, you know, I think it's really great to kind of, because it is a heroic thing these days to be able to put a home cooked meal on the table with all the other demands in our lives and commutes and everything. Like, it is, I am really just amazed by our members that are committed to like creating these home cooked meals, because it's not easy. It takes effort and work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have to be honest about that. It's not easy, which is why we can celebrate, right?
Yeah.
When we nail it, when we get it right. And I think the flexibility is so important, because as much as a lot of busy moms are like, oh, I wish somebody would just tell me what to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can do the work. I just want someone else to tell me. Then if someone tells us what to do, we're like, oh wait, no, I want my choice.
Right?
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. No. And I think, like, yeah, with ours, the more you cook, the more favors you'll build up, and like you'll be able to bring those back in. And we want to be able to let people, and I think it's interesting. We did a member survey last year, and the people that are most successful actually only cook like 2 new meals a week. So they'll like do they'll pick 2 meals from the current menu, and then they'll bring in old favorites, because, like, you know, everyone loves comfort. They love ease. And so if like something you like, right, like we don't need to feel like you need to change things up every single week. And so I think those are the folks that have been most successful, when they see that they're really just doing the kind of that baby step approach and not trying to like, you know, reinvent the wheel every single week. And then kind of they've just gotten to that routine, knowing like, I can only handle 1 or 2 new things. And then I'm going to bring in a bunch of old things that I know I will do well, that I know my kids will like.
Yep.
That really helps. And because I tell people, like, don't think of this as homework. I'm not checking to make sure if you made all 4 new things or whatever it is. Like, it's just here to support you. Like, I think people kind of get into their head that like, oh my God, this is another to-do list. It's like, no, it's just here when you need us. And like, it will hopefully help you with all the, you know, actually like getting to the goals that you want, which is really that home cooked meal, and then reducing that mental load and everything. So it's there for you. And it's not something that like we want to make people think that like that actually introduces more overwhelm by any means.
Right. Because so start with your why, like you said, start with your goals. And I think anyone here at Kitchen Stewardship and Kids Cook Real Food, like, we want the healthy food, we want the nourished family, we want the connected family. And that's what happens when you have a home cooked meal. It's so fascinating that your members are finding just about 2 new recipes a week, but it completely makes sense. It's another layer of that mental load. I think when I walk into the kitchen, even if I have sort of a complicated recipe, if I've made it 5 or 10 times, I kind of know, like, you just have a little bit of autopilot. You know which pot to grab, you know which, you know, where your seasonings are or whatever. Like, there's just a little bit less thinking. Whereas again, like last week I was trying a new recipe and it wasn't even hard, not hard at all. Like 3 steps, 2 ingredients, seriously. But I still, like, there was that block of like, I have to look it up. I have to remember where I put it. And then I have to do this thing with this new vegetable I've never tried. It was yucca fries. It wasn't even that hard. I just had never done it. And I felt like I needed to wrap my brain around the recipe beginning to end before I started. And that I put it off like till the 3rd time it was in my meal plan. And I just had to like cut it out the other days and like made potatoes or something, because there's a total mental block. So that makes perfect sense. Like, you got to think about your mental load and talk about that with your kids too, right? Like,
no, exactly.
Let's do something that is familiar, and then, you know, let's do something that's exciting or whatever, and switch it up for the kids too, because they like familiarity too.
Oh no, exactly. My kids, we have to eat like the same meal every single day for the most part, because they just like, you know, they're toddlers, and so they like that routine. And for us, like, even though like we introduce lots of new meals, like, we create all of our own recipes. And so there's a consistency in the way things are written, and the way, like, actually what we know what's in your pantry, because we just assumed, like, if you've been using us for a while, like, we have a sense of like all the ingredients we've introduced. So we never introduce anything that's like super weird or esoteric that involves like having you to go really far to get. So everything we do is like really doable. Like, we are in that mindset of like, people are busy, people are cooking for families that might have different, you know, eating preferences. Like, what can we do to make your lives really easy with these recipes? And so we also make things so that like there's a prep section, because we do find that like people just don't realize, like, when you don't just get into the kitchen and like start cooking, right? Like, all that prep needs to be involved. And so we write everything out really explicitly to really just prevent any sort of, user error. We try to make things, we try to spoon feed things as easy as simple as possible so that you are just like have what you need and can get going in the kitchen.
Yes, which is perfect for families with older kids because if it's written in, the most simple, basic way, the kids can understand it too. And B, and I've seen a lot of members do this too, where they'll have a prep day. And man, if you can get 2 or 3 kids going along with yourself with knives, it moves so quickly. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. I need to get my kids to that stage. They're still a couple years away.
Yours are a little young. Very true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the perfect fit because at Kitchen Stewardship, we are infinitely practical. And with our Kids Cook Real Food, regular Healthy Parenting Connector series, I always end with like a super practical step that listeners can do right away today. So let's get a quick win. If we do one thing when it comes to meal planning, what should it be, Jess?
It should be what you did this summer. Write out like 10 to 20 recipes that you can do in your sleep, right? Like those should be your first go-tos. Like when you are meal planning for the week, that's what you should fill in your week with first. And then you can fill in all the other stuff. So and I think for some people, since they don't have that list written out or like in a Google Doc or whatever note-taking app you have, like just get in there and write down those 10 to 20 recipes that you could make in your sleep that are really, really simple. And then just start from there. And it'll feel like that first step of meal planning is removed. Because I think like when you're staring at a blank piece of paper and thinking like, what am I going to make for the week? That's the hard part, right? Like, But if you have this, this reserve, this list of like things that are going to be easy wins for you that you can get into the kitchen and feel like muscle memory will just guide you, like that's going to make your week so much easier and make meal planning so much easier. So I would start with that. So sit down for, 10, 20 minutes with a cup of tea, whatever it is that makes you feel happy, and just jot those recipes down and then start from there.
Totally. And no guilt about reusing your family favorite recipes either.
No.
I think sometimes we feel this pressure that we have to have so much variety, but oh my gosh, if you have 10 recipes your family loves and you use 2 per week, that's not even a repeat a month.
No,
not
exactly.
even one. So like just put those in, first to get over the blank slate syndrome. That's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, you can find Jess at cooksmarts.com and go there, join her community. She is an awesome kitchen cheerleader. And I just love your energy, your spirit, your passion about helping other people, Jess. And that's absolutely what we do here and what we need here at Kitchen Stewardship and Kids Cook Real Food. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Katie. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
All right. Here's to your best meal planning year ever, everybody.
Yes. Good luck.